Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Tony Reda, who's president and CEO of Tectonic Metals, who are a mineral exploration company focused on the acquisition, exploration, discovery, and development of mineral resources from district scale projects in politically stable jurisdictions that have potential world-class ore bodies. And some of these areas, that jurisdictions that they focus on, are Canada and the US, and maybe more. Tony's been in mining for 20 years plus, and he's here to talk about Tectonic and how they've developed as a company and what the future holds for them. So that's welcome, Tony, to the podcast. How you doing, Tony?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
No, and I appreciate you taking the time. Obviously, just speaking off air, it's very early in the morning over there in Canada, so appreciate you getting up early.
It is, but you know what helps in the morning is a good cup of coffee and your voice. You got a great accent. Love the accent.
Thank you very much. Right, so wondered if you can give our audience an overview of yourself or background of yourself. So probably when you studied and when you got into the mining industry to sort of current day.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it still surprises me to this day. And someone was asking me, actually, a good friend of mine, about how do you find your passion in life? And I'm like, I was like, there's no secret sauce, there's no magic formula to finding it. I think it's in you somewhere deep inside, and maybe a certain event uncovers it or brings it forward. And for me, that event, and it wasn't, I didn't know it at the time, but that event was when I was 21 years old. That was 1995. I met a person at an actual nightclub, and he told me about a mining stock. He goes, you should look at this mining stock. We started talking about stocks, and I didn't do any investing whatsoever. So my first ever investment as Tony Reda was I bought a mining stock, and I made a bit of money. Go figure. Hey, it can happen once in a while. And that got me pretty intrigued and excited to learn a bit more about mining, and off I went, and I did that. So fast forward to 1997, Bre-X happened, and Bre-X taught me just how dumb of an investor I was. And it also enlightened me that the mining sector is not all roses and sunny days, that there actually are some companies that are maybe not as credible, doing some things that aren't above code. And I actually got really turned off by the mining sector. And then, long story short, over the next few years, I sort of just watched as an observer. And then in 2005, I wanted to pursue a different type of career. I was working for my father in a few different businesses that we had as a family. And I met an individual that actually was starting a new company through a colleague of mine, and said, hey, I want to get back into the mining sector, but this time I actually want to go work for a credible company and possibly make a difference. And my first interview was with a gentleman from Kaminak Gold Corporation, and he liked me. We had 4 interviews. I met 2 of the directors, the chairman. It was a private entity at that point in time, and off I went. I got hired as an investor relations in 2005. We took Kaminak public, and had it wasn't, everyone hears about the success there, but we had a few wins along the way. But it wasn't until 2010 where we made our initial big discovery at a project called the Coffee Gold Project. We actually hit on the very first drill hole. This project was never drilled prior to us, so I was involved in the acquisition of that discovery, and then the delineation of 5 million plus ounces of gold, and a robust feasibility study. And that company and project was acquired in 2016 for $520 million. So that's kind of a bit about my background. I'm not a mining person. I'm not a geologist. I have a business background, and what I loved about Kaminak, the relationships with the people was phenomenal, but it was my university. Someone that really didn't know a whole lot about mining, I learned every facet, and to watch a company grow from moose pasture to something that was potentially going to become a mine was phenomenal. And raising capital, I got to meet all the players, and we raised about 165 million during that endeavor. And I also have to give props to the CEO at that time. for actually, he had a PhD in economic geology, and I was eager to learn, and I wanted to get out in the field. And so he gave me the opportunity, every project, to go out in the field and actually work as a geologist, like taking soil samples, lake sediment sampling, mapping, prospecting, and then also just learning through osmosis in technical meetings. I really got a handle on some of the technical aspects, and that's actually kind of where my heart is at. I'm not technically a geologist, but I love geology. I love being in the field, and I love everything about this industry. The good, the bad, the ugly. It's all there. So there you go. That's kind of my background.
No, that's an interesting story, and it all started in a nightclub.
Yeah, who would have thought? Yeah, I guess there is some good things that could come out of that. But, yeah, it all started, and yeah. So, anyways, a drink, an alcohol drink, and the nightclub, and the conversation. I don't even know who that individual was. Like I haven't followed up with him, but it sort of just it's easy in hindsight to look back and start connecting the dots, but that's how it happened.
Well, you never know, he might be listening, whoever that is.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wonder if you can give us an overview of Tectonic Metals then.
Yeah, definitely. So, I took all those past experiences, the Bre-X fallout, my Kaminak endeavors, and just being an investor in the space. And like I said, at Kaminak, one of the best things that came out of it was the relationship aspects. So we knew we had something special with some of the team members at Kaminak, and we wanted to do something different. We wanted to go back to organic growth, exploration, and also put an emphasis on risk management. And so we started this company with the people in mind, and we handpicked various individuals. It was Ira Thomas, myself, Rob Carpenter, Allison Armstrong, Kurt Freeman. And once we had the team intact, we're like, okay, what do we want to do? Like we knew we wanted to go into Alaska. We loved the fact that there's very well-known, respected native corporations, and we wanted to work with them on their land. We thought that was much more of a streamlined process than working on state or federal land. And we designed this business model centered around risk management, reward as well. And when I say risk management, junior mining or exploration is like 99% risk. It's 99% failure. The norm is to fail. So why not focus on that and try to mitigate as much of that as possible, and look at all the obstacles that typical junior mining companies face at various stages of their life cycle, and let's try to look at those obstacles and address them at the forefront. So we engage early. Our agreements, our property agreements have production agreements. They're full scale production agreements. We work on, as you prefer to be called in Alaska, on native owned land. We've also are backed by indigenous people or native people. And Tectonic is really there trying to find the next tier 1 discovery. So we're in a great jurisdiction. We focus on big things. We've had success with a drill bit already, and we're going into the field this year to have another exciting drill season.
Okay. So what excites you about obviously some of the projects you're involved in at TIBS and 70-mile?
When you look at these projects, I see scale. I see grade gets me excited. That's anytime you see visible gold or splashy gold numbers, you kind of like, your ears perk up. And they have all of our projects have been sort of explored a bit in the past, but the questions still haven't been answered. And so we're going back in to answer those questions, but also apply a different type of thinking, some new models, if you will. And I think there's a real opportunity there. And so they're also vastly underexplored. So there's a few boxes ticked that gets me excited.
Okay. So I wonder if you can sort of elaborate on the common mineralization you see at TIBS versus what you found at Pogo.
Yeah, so the gold mineralization that we see at TIBS, so to this day, the Goodpaster District is what hosts the Pogo mine in our project as well. And TIBS is the only project that actually has produced high-grade gold mineralization and drilling that is akin to Pogo style mineralization. So it's also worth noting that TIBS was actually discovered by the same entity that discovered Pogo. So when they discovered Pogo, it was called the Stone Boy joint venture at that time. It was a consortium of 3 mining companies. They went out and earned in or optioned our TIBS project, because that's how much of a lookalike it is. So the gold mineralization is very similar. Not at all the zones, but at Graylead it definitely is. And we've been able to find different variations of Pogo style mineralization, and also a new style of mineralization on the property as well. Last year, we made a very concerted effort to actually apply the new updated Pogo model. So this model was updated at Pogo in 2013. No one had our property in 2013. So we said, okay, let's actually specifically target the gneissic rocks, which is the exact same host rock as Pogo. Let's actually go target the USGS, the United States Geological Survey, these mapped low angle thrust faults, which have the opportunity to represent low angle veins. And we've actually produced some pretty remarkable gold and soil anomalies that now have the exact same geochemistry as the Pogo mineralization, situated on mapped low angle thrust faults in the right host rocks. And we're going to go drill test those this year. So there's, yeah.
I was going to say, whereabouts are these exactly in?
So
in what the actual
we're
region?
situated about, TIBS is probably about 30 kilometers away from Pogo.
Okay. And whereabouts in Canada is this?
Shoot. Are you there, Rob?
Yeah, you can carry on.
Oh, okay, sorry, your screen froze there. It's frozen on my end. Yeah. So the soil anomalies, or sorry, TIBS in general, situated about 30 kilometers away from Pogo.
Right, and whereabouts in Canada?
Oh, sorry. Well, we're actually situated in Alaska.
Okay.
Yeah. So TIBS and Pogo are situated in Alaska, the good pasture mining district.
Right. Okay. And obviously the other prospect, which is 70-mile, that obviously seems a promising target. So just wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, we, part of our approach to targeting large scale tier 1 type potential projects, you definitely want to target greenstone belts, and 70-mile is a greenstone belt, in Alaska as well, that hasn't been explored since the mid 1990s. And what's interesting is that they actually didn't view the property as a greenstone belt, the previous explorer. So that's an opportunity unto itself. We're applying a high grade shear zone model to the property. And we're also going back to where they actually had some success with the drill bit, some really good success actually. But they actually dropped the property in 1997. If you recall earlier in this podcast, I mentioned that's when BRIEX happened. So when BRIEX unfolded in all over the world, but it's more specifically to junior mining companies, let's just say in Vancouver or the Vancouver Stock Exchange at that time, they got decimated. Capital became very hard to come by, and this company ended up sort of shutting its doors. So we're going back in to pick up where they left off, and then also apply this new model that we've come up with here. And there's 5 grams over 15 meters in one drill hole that's sitting all by itself, open long strike. There's 1.34 over 44 meters that's sitting all by itself. So there's some low-hanging fruit opportunities. There's some new soil anomalies, and we're literally just focusing on maybe 10% of the property. It's 150,000 acres in size, 40 kilometers long, and we're only in like a 6-kilometer portion of the property. So it's still very much early days, but a lot of targets. And again, also going to be drill tested this year. And anytime you're drilling, it's exciting. So
yeah, certainly. And waiting for those discoveries. Can you tell us more about the partnership with is it Doon Limited, and how that came about? Yeah,
Doon Limited. So as I mentioned, we wanted, as part of our approach, trying to find big scale, high grade deposits. The jurisdiction is important, not only from a geological perspective, but also from a government social perspective. What is the permitting like as well? So Alaska ticked a lot of boxes for us. It was completely untapped. And as I mentioned earlier, we wanted to work with the local native corporations of the First Nations. We were inspired by our previous agreements and work that we've done, and working on native owned land. It's a much more streamlined process, providing that they're pro mining, pro business. So we had a few areas in mind that geologically were intriguing, and they were situated on Doyon land. And so we one of our founders, Kurt Freeman, had a relationship already with Doyon. And so I said to Kurt, hey, I want to go meet the president, or I want to go meet their VP. Let's start building a relationship with them, because they're the largest private landholder in Alaska, and there's so much opportunity on their land that we need to start getting access to some of this opportunity. And Alaska, like other parts of the United States, doesn't have a public mineral database, so you need relationships with them. You need to get access into their data room, or their filing cabinet, whatever the case may be. So we literally, he set up a meeting, and we walked in. Myself, never met them ever prior. Walked into their office in Fairbanks, Alaska, and sat down with the vice president, the VP, vice president of lands, and introduced myself. And he was probably a bit wary of me being a junior miner, and they've had dealings in the past with some junior miners and also some major mining companies as well. But mining wasn't really their focus at that moment in time. They were pretty much focused on oil and gas and other resources and other opportunities. So that's how it just started with the conversation. Hi, my name is Tony. This is what we're about, and probably took 4 or 5 meetings before we really started getting comfortable with each other. We signed a non-disclosure agreement on a few projects of interest, and we ended up acquiring 2 projects shortly. Well, probably 10 months later, actually. So we also, part of our process is to go meet the local communities, and so we actually invited, we asked them if we could go fly down, and they're like, well, why? And so we explained the rationale, and the 4 founders went in, and the 4 founders and our VP at that time, Allison Armstrong, we went down to a local community and introduced ourselves, and they didn't know anything about us, and said, hey, are you open to mining? Are you open to mineral exploration more specifically? How can we work together, so on and so forth. And it turned out to be a great relationship as well. So that's kind of like the crux of how it all started with our native corporation partner.
Yeah. And how is Alaska open to mining now? I mean, obviously you mentioned they probably weren't so just previously. How do you think now? Are they pretty open to mining, and maybe more companies coming into the area?
Yeah, I definitely think that's always been the case. Like a lot of jurisdictions, everything gets all lumped into one thing. Alaska is huge. It's the size of BC, British Columbia, and the Yukon, if you want to use that as an example. And not all parts are created equally. There are protected parts. There's beautiful places, and mining should not be there. There's there's the Denali Mountain Range. There's the salmon fisheries as well that takes place. And so they are open to mining, and obviously depending where, but the government is, they're a northern community, and they're dependent on natural resources. And when it comes to native corporations, yeah, it depends on who you're dealing with and where their lands are situated. And for the most part, we've had nothing but a positive experience. There's 7 producing mines in the state. We had about 2 years ago, there was probably about 6 producing companies that moved into the state. So it's definitely getting on people's radars. And when you look at, if you're a VP or you're an executive of a mining company and you're tasked with finding the next tier 1 deposit, there's only so many places you can look, and everyone's appetite for risk is shrinking by the minute. You want to go into a stable, predictable jurisdiction. If it's in a first world, even that can be even considered better. So I think Alaska is definitely coming on the radar for many people, and a lot of people just don't understand it. Or you hear Alaska, they think Eskimos or whatever else, northern climate, but it's not like that. I mean, it's like that to some extent, but it has a lot of pluses. So I'm all for it, and I think it's every year we can see the expenditures in the state actually going back up with over time here. So
okay, and how many meters are you sort of looking to planning to drill this year?
At least 5,000 meters. So it's a decent sized program. It's not like 50,000 meters, but given our treasury and our targets, this is if we have success, then we'll look to ramp that up accordingly.
Okay. Looking at some material around Tectonic, You describe the company as a shift in the game.
Mm.
What do you mean by that?
Okay, great question. I think it goes back to just, like the genesis of the company and, bringing something different to the exploration space. So that involves like every aspect. So if we start with the people, well, let's just not make it the all boys club and pick my friends as directors and that sort of thing. Let's actually start with handpicking. When you look at the different skill sets within a junior mining company, what do we need? So we actually have an environmental biologist on our board. She's been involved in the permitting of 9 mines. She's a female. Not that it matters on the female part, but what it matters is her skill and her talent and what she brings to the table, and she brings a different perspective. That's what I love about her. Like most companies are just, okay, pick the best mining people or best explorationists, a capital person, but we're like, okay, well, sustainability, ESG is important. It's in our DNA. So let's start with that. We looked at, our chairman, for example, is in the Indigenous Hall of Fame. He's also of Indigenous descent. And, so the shift was around the people, starting with the people first, and let's all actually have a meaningful ownership position in the company. So we've participated in every financing. We own on a partially diluted basis, just over 25% of the company. So we're all in. And then we looked at, okay, let's actually have a business model. So the shift is about, not just about a drill play or get a project. We're like, okay, let's actually build a business model. The shift also involves working, building relationships with major mining companies, with people on the ground, with our native partner. So our projects are situated on native owned land for the most part. And we actually said, okay, let's, as far as the shift is concerned, let's not wait till the feasibility stage and then we have to negotiate IBAs, so impact benefits agreement, and and there's multiple things at play. Let's actually look at it from the forefront, and let's actually form a full-scale production agreement. And in that agreement, let's actually talk about ESG. Let's actually talk about reclamation. So are these agreements have actually reclamation components in it, preferential hiring, local hiring, utilizing DOION entities, for example, when possible. We also said, let's have scholarship contributions. So we're trying to, at the beginning, not when the prize has already been established, actually, make a difference in the community. So we actually have a few different scholarships that we contribute to, and we're going to start as well. The shift also involves like the approach to project acquisition. We go meet the locals before we acquire a property. When possible. Not every project's next to a local community, but let's de-risk the project from that perspective. So it's all elements of the business, and even just our stance even right now. A few months ago, we put out an anti-racism policy, position statement, I should say, and we're beefing up our policies. Just really trying to bring a breath of fresh air to the entire space.
Yeah. Obviously, talking about the subject of ESG, why do you feel that Tectonic Metals has a strong commitment to ESG and its value to investors?
I think we do because it's, going back to the people within this organization, we've all been, like, we looked at our past experiences, and I tell you, man, there's nothing more rewarding than working with the locals and having, when you mention the company name, that it brings a smile to their face. And we've also been on the other side where we're trying to push a project through, and we're facing, they weren't our companies. We worked for people at that time, or other organizations, and they're giving us blowback because we didn't engage, or we didn't do this. So for us, it was something that, at the inception, we recognized that if we don't deal with this at the forefront and make a commitment to it, it could come back and bite us in the ass. And it's also the right way to do business. Like I said, Allison is on. She's a director of Tectonic, and she's an environmental biologist. We all, as people who explore, the common thread with explorationists is that we love the outdoors, we love the nature, we love the environment. So how can we have the two coincide peacefully? So we do that. We look at the projects before we acquire them and say, okay, what are the environmental hurdles we have to overcome, and is it worth it, and do we want to be that company that does this, right? We don't want a project next to a national park or within a national park and so on and so forth. That's just not our cup of tea. So ESG was just important because A, it can cause a lot of headaches going down the road. B, it's the right thing to do. C, we're all passionate about the environment, passionate about the people in the local communities. To this day, I think we have a bit of a legacy in the Yukon, if I can be so bold, where you mentioned Kaminak and people say, oh yeah, they created the scholarship. We actually have a college program, environmental monitoring program, that Allison was involved with. I was also involved with. Actually, we were all involved with, but Allison was the spearhead of that initiative. That's now continuing on. So these are all positive things, and we're really passionate about our industry, and so we want to make sure that it's represented properly in the public eye, and so that's why ESG is kind of really important to us.
Yeah, certainly. What's the one thing you think investors should understand more about the company's projects?
That's a great question. Everyone always focuses to the opportunity, like the drilling opportunity or the production opportunity. No one really they talk a bit, but I think they should definitely focus on the risk and ask them, what is their, ask them about their ESG. What are they doing on that front? Ask them, have they met the locals? Are they working with the locals? And I actually think it would be wise to ask, if you were an investor, to ask the company if you could speak to their indigenous partners or the local communities. And in our case, anybody wants to speak to the VP or the CEO of Doyon, they've readily told us that they make themselves available. And also to the local villages, there's a chief we have a partnership with there, and she would make herself available to speak. So I think that you can take my word for it, or you can actually go right directly and hear it from the horse's mouth. What do they think? So I think investors need to address, you do more due diligence on the risk side, because ultimately, as a project advances, that the importance of that gets greater and greater and greater. And if you can sew that up in the beginning, then obviously it's a much more streamlined process. So that would be my 2 cents on what investors should be potentially focusing on.
Yeah, certainly. And as a conclusion, I wonder if you can give us an outlook of the company over the next 3 to 5 years, I'd say.
Okay, well, that's a great question, and it's also part of our project. When we acquire projects, we actually have a 3-year plan with every project. But as a whole, as a company, I'm obviously betting on having some success with the drill bit this year. So expect a lot of news flow, drill results from those projects, and I can't say everything's going to be a slam dunk, and we're going to assess the results and go forward. We also have a healthy project pipeline of ideas and opportunities in front of us. So, in 3 to 5 years, I would like to see these targets get drill tested, possibly turn into meaningful deposits, see some new project acquisitions in the pipeline, and also additional partnerships with, whether it's with large mining companies or with other native corporations or existing native corps, to see that relationship unfold in something greater and more meaningful. In 3 to 5 years' time, I'd love to have a mineral resource estimate on our projects and be advancing towards PEA or feasibility study, and have a few different partnerships or joint ventures under our belt, and hopefully have visibility on something becoming a mine.
Yeah, certainly. Tony, really appreciate your time. Obviously providing us an overview of Tectonic Metals, and obviously an overview of Alaska as well. So, and I'll take it is an unexplored jurisdiction to a greater extent, and there seems to be a lot of opportunities. So if any of our audience wants to reach out to you, how can they go about doing that? And are you across any social media platforms, you or the company?
Yeah, most definitely. On the social media front, we're on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, that sort of thing. And it's Tectonic Metals Inc. Our ticker symbols TECT on the TSX Venture. We also have a US OTCQB listing. TETOF is the the initials there, and www.tectonicmetals.com. And you can also email us at info@tectonicmetals.com. If you want to get a hold of us, and we're always open to conversations and questions. I mentioned, the relationship aspects of whether at Kamenak or amongst ourselves. That's been like a real, something I really hold dear to my heart. And building relationships with shareholders and potential investors is also awesome. So I'm always readily available. And on our website, you can actually book a meeting directly with me. Love talking to the people, and that's because of COVID and no one's traveling right now. It's something that we miss, not being able to go to London and meet the people there, or not going to, your other parts of Europe or down in North America. So, this is the avenue we have right now. So we have to make the best of it, and love to chat with anyone.
Yeah, certainly, and that's how we can obviously do this podcast recording as well over Zoom. So, our audience, hope you enjoyed this episode, and please feel free to reach out to Tony, especially if you want to find out more about Alaska, because like I mentioned, it's probably a relatively undeveloped jurisdiction in terms of mining, and there's probably many opportunities. So if you've got any questions, hopefully Tony can answer them. So appreciate all the listeners. If you can share and like this episode, if you're watching on the podcast, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, if you can like and share below, and people listen to the podcast, appreciate as normal if you can share this episode out with your friends, family, other people in the mining industry that has an interest in learning, developing, and understanding more about our mining industry on a global scale. So, Tony, really appreciate your time again. I know it's early in the morning. You may want to go back to bed for a few hours, but really appreciate your time, and give us an overview of Tectonic Metals.
Thank you for having me, and pleasure meeting you as well. And I really enjoyed this. It was great. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries, and I appreciate your time. And until next time, happy mining.